Chapter 10, Time Trap. Grimly, Mason guides the ship forward. The tensile strength of the craft he does not know, but he suspects that under the ant's chitinous armor it is fragile. In this he is wrong. A blow of the monster's wing crashes against the ship, sends it whirling, hurling Mason and Eliza from their feet. He catches a glimpse of the tower rushing towards him, managing to drag himself upright against the controls. With scarcely a foot to spare, the vessel loops around and goes driving back towards the winged colossus. The creature comes to meet them in the last moment before impact. Mason's fingers stab at the panel, attempting to change course, but he is too late. With a grinding, frightful impact, winged monster and time ship come together catastrophically. Mason is hurled back, his fingers raking blindly over the control keys. He has a flashing vision of the ant's shattered body plummeting to the plane below, and then intense blackness is all around him. Something thuds against his head, and in the last seconds of consciousness, Mason realizes what the darkness means. The ship, unguided, is racing through time. Only for a moment, it seems, is Mason out, groaning with pain in his throbbing head. He lifts himself to his feet and fumbles blindly in the darkness for the controls. Then suddenly he realizes that the gloom is not complete. Through the ship's transparent walls, he sees a star-bright sky above and an uneven black wall around, apparently a rampart of trees. The ship lays tilted perilously on its side. He sees a pale blotch in a corner, Eliza's face. He cannot aid her while she lays on the sharply slanting floor. Mason opens the port, managing to scramble out, half carrying Eliza. Underfoot is a layer of humus, half-rotted vegetation with a dank, musky odor. The air is uncomfortably hot and moist. Fumbling in the starlight, Mason tries to revive the girl. She sits up eventually, clinging to him, rubbing a bruise on her shoulder.
The ant. Where are we, Kent? Did we find Eric and Murdoch?
I guess not, Mason tells her. Apparently the time controls were accidentally moved when we hit the giant ant. We've probably come through time to this sector and crashed while we were unconscious. It's sheer luck that we didn't have our necks broken. I guess the ground surface is higher here than in the future time. That may account for it.
But where are we?
I haven't the slightest idea. I don't think we went forward. This thick forest and the heat indicates a past era. I hope it isn't the Cretaceous. I'd hate to meet a Tyrannosaurus.
What's that?
The girl asks, her eyes wide. A dragon. The name means thunder lizard. But... And then the attack came. Mason hears no noise in the underbrush, but out of the forest dark figures come charging. There is no warning. Before Mason has a chance to brace himself, down he goes, a dozen wiry bodies swarming over him. And then fire bursts in the back of his head, red fire that is swallowed up by abysmal blackness. He wakes in the dimness of what seems to be a crudely built hut. Warm sunlight slanting through the doorway, a human shadow of a guard darkening the floor. Mason shakes his head, groaning. He hears a low, muffled chanting, and recognizing it. In his archaeological work, probing into the far corners of the globe, Mason has acquired a sound knowledge of little-known dialects. He has heard similar sounds long ago floating down a South American river in a hollow dugout canoe, his arm throbbing and festering with the wound of an arrow. Had he, by some incredible chance, returned to his own time sector? The doorway darkens. Men file in, near-naked little men with brown, muscular bodies. They are grotesquely painted, and feathers nodding and waving in the air. Chanting, they free Mason's legs. The leather thongs, he realizes, still bind his wrists. Hesitatingly, Mason speaks, trying to remember that alien dialect of years ago. I am a friend. A native struck his mouth. Silence. The word was oddly accented, but recognizable. You are to watch, not to speak. Again the chant rose. Hear our prayers, O Thunderer. Hear the prayers of the Kuripuri. The natives urge him outside the hut. Mason blinks, accustoming his eyes to the strong sunlight. He stares around. The towering walls of the crater march on the horizon. Black basalt ramparts hem them in. To the east is a jagged gap, apparently a pass, and at their feet the ground slopes down to the motionless, sullen waters of a lake. No wind ruffles its surface. Dark, enigmatic, it fills the crater, save for the narrow strip of land on which the native village stands. A score of flimsy huts are in curious contrast to the stone pyramid that stands on the lake's shore. Mason is pushed toward it. Its shadow falls on him. It is perhaps 30 feet high, built of huge blocks of stone without mortar. In one side is a gaping aperture. Into this the white man is conducted. A short passage and then a room, half underground. A temple, Mason realizes. Amazement lances through him. At one end of the chamber is a raised dais, on which stands a chair, a throne gleaming dully in the light of torches, a golden throne, jewel-studded. Its build is suggestive of Incan workmanship. Yet these brown-skinned natives are not Incas. Perhaps Incas had built this pyramid and had been killed by the invading tribe, the Curipuri, as they call themselves, Mason hazards. This is the past, he knows, a time perhaps long before Columbus has reached the Indies, certainly prior to the coming of the Spanish conquistadors. On the throne a corpse sits, a mummy, withered and shrunken and dry, in whose eye sockets glow two flaming rubies. Golden breastplates and a girdle of gold hang loosely on the skeletal figure. Beside the throne stands a native girl, her amber body scarcely hidden by a translucent feathery cape through which alluring curves are visible. Her sullen eyes brood on the white man. On the walls are heads, smaller than coconuts, shrunken by some secret process that preserves flesh and features. Their multitude almost hides the rough stones, natives' heads, all of them. The chanting grows louder. A dozen gaudily painted Curipuri file into the chamber. Among them is Eliza. For a moment her golden eyes meet Mason's. "Can't," she cries. "They—" A guard clasps a rough hand over her mouth. Cursing, Mason wrenches at his bonds. His captors hold him silent and impassive. The Curipuri take the girl up to the dais, clamp golden rings around her ankles. From the throng, a dwarfish native steps to stand beside the girl. His face is hideous with paint. From a bald, shaven head, white feathers nod, set in a jewel-studded headdress. The man lifts his hand, and the noise quiets. From the Curipuri comes a great shout. "Zol!" The native girl steps forward. Mason reads hatred in her eyes as she glances at the dwarfish Zol. Again comes the deep-throated roar. "Yana! Ho! Yana!" Zol throws back his head, the white feathers bowing. He cries, "The Thunderer looks with favor upon us." He points to the withered corpse on the throne. For years she has sat there, ruling the Curipuri in death. Since she lives, we have found no girl with a skin white enough to be our priestess. So Yana has served. He glances slyly at the priestess beside him. But now her toil has ended. From the skies has fallen a maiden with the skin white as foam. We almost slew her, but the Thunderer stayed my stroke. From the Curipuri comes a roaring chant. "Ho! Dweller in the abyss, dark Thunderer, hear us." The girl Yana cries, "Hear our prayers! Drink, eat of our sacrifice!" Her red lips were cruel. "Lord of the lake," thunders the Curipuri, "look on our sacrifice." Then silence, heavy and ominous. Yana says, "The priestess must be unblemished." Her voice is sweetly malicious. Zal nods, turning to Eliza. His hands go out, ripping the tattered cloak from her. A gasp goes up from the natives. The girl stands nude, her bronze hair spilling in a tumbled mass on bare shoulders. Instinctively, her hands are up in an attempt to cover herself. Zol shouts laughter as he gazes at the nude girl, at the sweeping curves of her body, flawless in its beauty. Then the priest tears the feather cloak from Yana and casts it about Eliza's shoulders. Nausea tears at Mason's throat as he sees the body of the priestess naked save for a brief loincloth. From neck to ankles she has been tattooed. Red and blue designs circle the mounds of her breasts, flow across her rounded hips. Understanding the months of agony the girl must have endured makes Mason feel suddenly sick. The shouting dies. Zol chants, "She is unmarried. Perfect. Tonight the testing begins. The mark of the Thunderer shall be put upon her." The mark of her Thunderer? Eliza shudders, drawing the translucent cloak closer. In the eyes of Yana, Mason sees a red blaze of rage. Her lashes droop. She turns away. The Curipuri close about Mason. Vainly struggling, he is forced from the temple, taken back to the hut. There, legs once more bound, he is left alone. The afternoon drags on. Occasionally the guard will enter to test the captive's bonds, though Mason tries to engage in conversation with the man, he meets with no success. Perhaps the Kuripuri are forbidden to converse with their prisoners. Just after sunset, Mason hears voices outside the hut, and presently Yana, the priestess, enters. Two natives are at her heels. One is the guard. He frees Mason's feet, and with the other, Kuripuri, leaves the hut. The priestess kneels beside Mason. In the dimness, the disfiguring tattooing is invisible, and Mason can only see the smooth curves of the girl's body, scarcely hidden by thin cloth. She says softly, "The guard is gone. I told him Zal wishes him to hunt in the forest, and the other who waits without is my friend." Mason stares at her. Fumbling with the Kuripuri dialect, he says, "One has need of friends here." She nods. "It is true. I would like to save the white girl." "Yes," Mason says swiftly. "Will you help me?" "Perhaps." "Why?" He does not entirely trust this girl, in whose eyes murderous rage springs so easily. "In your place I should not hesitate. You are strangers, I know that. You are not gods, as some said, else you would not be bound and helpless now. Whence you come I do not care, so long as you leave here swiftly. The place where we were captured, is it far? The place where is it far from here?" No. You saw the gap in the mountains, the pass. It is not far. Just beyond that you can reach it in a fourth part of a day. And as for why I shall help you, it is because the white-skinned girl will take my place. For years a pale-skinned priestess of our tribe has ruled us. When the last one died, I took her place. Zol did not like that, for I would not always obey him. Now he sees a chance to depose me and gain a puppet priestess. I would kill this white girl, but it would be sacrilege. I would be tortured. But if you escape with her, it will be different." "Then untie me," Mason says, his voice eager. The girl bends down, her hair brushing Mason's face. "But you must not fail, for there is another way." Again the mad rage flares in her eyes. "I have been the priestess of the Thunderer for more than a year, and I have learned much. The words of power that called the Dark Lord from the lake." Her tone is brooding. "I had it in mind to use these words once before. It was done ages ago, and the Dweller rose from the depths. The Kuripuri died, all but a few who fled." She shrugs, and her knife flashes, slicing through the last thongs that bind Mason. He stretches cramped muscles. "Tell me," he says curiously, "have you ever seen any white men not of your tribe, like me?" "No, never. I did not think any existed. Our priestesses had golden skin, not as white as yours." She watches Mason speculatively. "You must wait. It will be dark soon. If you leave the hut now, you will be killed." The hard anger is gone from Yana's eyes. They are strangely tender. "You are not like the Kuripuri, and since I became priestess, I have not known love." Suddenly her arms are about Mason's neck, her breath hot against his cheek as she strains against him. Mad torrent of passion seem unleashed in the priestess. She whispers softly, "I have not known love, and—" Mason tries to free himself. The girl draws back, her face hardening. She says, "No. Remember, you have not freed the white girl yet. If I should summon aid—" Mason grins wryly. Then Yana is in his arms once more. It is not easy to resist. No, under the thin cloth of her garment he feels the alluring curves of her body. Shrugging, Mason bends his head, touching the girl's lips. He does not draw back. The moist inferno of her mouth quickens his pulses. Within the priestess is the hot soul of flame, breath of the searing Zonda that blows across the pampas, hungry passion that surges through Mason like a rushing tide. She shudders and moans. A noise comes from outside the hut. Instantly Yana pulls away, a finger at her lips. "Wait!" She disappears outside. Mason hears her voice raised in dispute with a deeper one. Then the two die slowly in the distance. He creeps to the entrance, peers out. No one is visible nearby, though a few Kuripuri move aimlessly about the village in the distance. The sun is already low. He will not have long to wait. 2 hours after it is dark enough to make the venture. The guard has not returned. He slinks out of his prison. The moon has just risen, and he keeps in the shadows of the huts. A heavy club discarded by a dying fire catches his eye, and he confiscates it. He moves toward the pyramid, a muffled chanting waking ominous apprehensions within him. He catches a glimpse of motion on the summit, and he thinks he sees Aleza's bronze hair, though he cannot be sure. Glancing aside at the lake, Mason involuntarily shudders. What had Yana said? A thunderer in the depths? A monster god to whom the Kuripuri sacrificed? In this dawn of history, could some strange survival actually exist beneath those sullen waters? Even in his day, there had been legends of the South American swamps and jungles. End of chapter 10.